As far as the design goes, well, there's really nothing else like it. The Mi 11 Ultra has a glossy ceramic back and a polished aluminum frame that's extremely thin on the sides. It comes in cosmic black or cosmic white like we have here. The back does pick up fingerprints, but it's not nearly as much of a smudge fest as glass phones. It weighs in at 234 grams, and in the hand it feels around the same size and heft as the iPhone 12 Pro Max and the Galaxy S21 Ultra. The most notable and hate it or love it part of the back's design is the camera setup. The camera island is so massive that it may as well be called Australia, and it sticks out significantly. You'll see 3 cameras on there and a 1.1-inch AMOLED display. In photo mode, you can use it to take selfies with the back cameras, though for some inexplicable reason, Xiaomi doesn't let you use it for selfie videos. When you're not using it for photography, the display shows the time, notifications, and the battery you have left. On the front of the phone, you'll find slim bezels, a hole punch in the upper left corner, and a gently curved display. I emphasize gently because it really is subtle and has nothing to do with the extreme curves we've seen on phones in the past. The display is protected by Gorilla Glass Victus, and the Mi 11 Ultra has IP68 dust and water resistance, so this Ultra has some level of protection against the elements. There's also an optical under-display fingerprint reader that has comfortable placement and was quick and reliable when we used it. As for the screen itself, the Mi 11 Ultra sports a 6.8-inch AMOLED panel with a 1440p resolution. It has a refresh rate that goes up to 120Hz and a 480Hz touch sampling rate. You can actually set the refresh rate to either high or standard mode, standard being the 60Hz mode and high being the 120Hz mode. Though if you do set it to the high mode, the Ultra automatically switches between refresh rates depending on what's being displayed and how you're interacting with the phone. For example, videos default to 60Hz, while when you're scrolling through the phone, it'll be at 120. Surprisingly, getting a higher refresh rate while gaming was unreliable, and we were often stuck at 60Hz, even on titles that go up to 120 on other phones. The Mi 11 Ultra supports HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, so Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and YouTube all serve HDR content. The display also has 10-bit colors, meaning it can show 1.07 billion colors instead of the usual 16 million that you get on other phones. You'll see the smoothest possible tonal gradients and no banding on here. Color reproduction itself was generally good, though not perfect. Original mode had essentially perfect results for sRGB calibration, which was funny because the dedicated sRGB mode in the advanced menu was actually less accurate. The auto mode isn't remarkably on point, and we saw bluish whites. As far as brightness was concerned, the display is fantastic. In bright light, the screen will go as high as 943 nits with auto boost enabled, and Xiaomi claims a peak brightness of 1700 nits with HDR content. The camera hardware is where Xiaomi have really outdone themselves. This is some of the most advanced camera hardware on any phone out there. It starts with a 50-megapixel main camera that has OIS and the biggest sensor on a smartphone. Then there's the 48-megapixel periscope telephoto camera with OIS and a native 5x optical zoom. Finally, there's the 48-megapixel ultra-wide camera with phase detection autofocus. It's one of the widest ultra-wide cameras out there. Shots look more like they're taken by a regular camera rather than a smartphone camera. Detail is excellently defined, and the phone did great with both straight lines and random textures. Noise is non-existent and colors were vivid, especially in nature scenes, but not to the extreme. We do wish the exposure would have been brighter, as the dynamic range is more than wide enough to handle it. The photos by the periscope cam have excellent detail and nice micro contrast. Shots weren't quite as clean as on the main camera, and we did see some noise. Dynamic range is some of the best we've seen on a zoom camera, and exposure was better than on the main camera. Colors were actually a good match for the main unit. The ultra-wide snapper had class-leading performance during the day too. There was abundant detail, not too much sharpening, no noise to be seen, and excellent dynamic range. Exposure was accurate too. The only issue we saw is that since the ultra-wide camera is so wide, there is a noticeable amount of barrel distortion despite the software correction. The ultra-wide's autofocus capability allows it to take good close-ups, though it doesn't quite focus close enough for us to be able to call them macro shots. When the light got low, we saw some night mode processing even in the regular photo mode. This is because by default there's a toggle switched on in settings called Enhanced Image Quality. It enables a sort of auto night mode. It was quick and unobtrusive, and it didn't cause any issues. The photos have a wide dynamic range, well-preserved highlights, though like during the day they look a little underexposed. Streetlights can make some areas look a bit too orange, but otherwise white balance is good. The detail was plenty too. Night mode was pretty much identical to the regular photo mode shots with the enhanced toggle switched on. Plain photo mode has less detail, a narrower dynamic range, and a lot more softness in the images. These are some of the best ultra-wide, low-light shots that we've seen so far. They have a lot of detail, controlled noise, and spot-on colors. There's less of an orange tint too. Highlights are more blown out than with the night mode though. Switch on the night mode and the dynamic range issues are fixed, and we see a lot more detail in the shadows. There's night mode sharpening, but it's done with restraint. As far as 5x zoom in low light is concerned, this phone is a champ. We saw extremely detailed photos and very low noise. Dynamic range isn't quite as impressive, but it's good enough. Even though you have the selfie display right next to the main cameras, you also have the option of taking a regular selfie. It's a 20 megapixel snapper with gyro EIS available for videos. Stabilization is available for all resolutions and frame rates. 8K video is very good. There is a bit more detail than the 4K capture, and the dynamic range is just as wide as on the lower resolution. In general, this was very usable footage. 4K at 30 FPS with the main camera produced very high quality videos. There was excellent detail, wide dynamic range, and nice colors. 4K footage from the ultra-wide camera was among the best we've seen too. While 4K footage with the periscope camera had a lower bitrate than the other two cameras, it too was great. Stabilized footage with the main camera was impressive, walking was softened, and pans were handled without abrupt transitions. Stabilized footage taken with the ultra-wide camera was even better thanks to the shorter focal length. We haven't seen 5x zoom footage as stable as the one from this camera. There were no micro jitters, just a gentle wave as the phone ironed out our movements. Despite the name, the Steady Video Pro mode wasn't all that impressive. It didn't manage to stabilize footage while running very well, and it's locked into 1080p.
The iPhone 12 Pro Max is like an upscaled version of the iPhone 12 Pro, with a bigger display and battery, but it also has an improved camera setup. It's also one of the most expensive phones you can buy these days. The Pro Max is made of frosted Gorilla Glass 6 on the back, and just like the other iPhone 12 models, it has a solid ceramic shield glass protecting the display that's scratch and shatter resistant. And of course, the whole device is IP68 rated for water resistance too, up to 6 meters underwater. A stainless steel frame holds everything together, and it has a glossy finish that doesn't provide a whole lot of grip. That plus the phone's size and heft make it not really ideal for one-handed use. This screen is larger than last year's Pro Max. It's a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED, with a pixel density of 458 ppi. It still brings a standard 60Hz refresh rate though. And up at the top is again a wide notch cutout for the selfie cam and 3D scanner. While it is a bit of an eyesore, it's not quite as offensive on this larger screen as it is on the smaller iPhones. This display is a really nice one regardless. Blacks are quite deep thanks to OLED technology, and color accuracy is excellent. You get true tone automatic white balance adjustments based on ambient lighting, and maximum brightness is really good. We measured 822 nits. Using the Pro Max outdoors in the sun is a breeze. Now on to the iPhone 12 Pro Max's 12 megapixel triple camera setup, which offers some upgrades over the likes of the 12 Pro. While the ultra-wide cam is the same, the main camera has a much larger sensor here, with sensor shift stabilization rather than OIS, off with daylight photos from the main cam. These are good, with high contrast, low noise, accurate white balance, and realistic colors. Dynamic range is wide, yet natural looking. However, if you were expecting something much better than the other iPhone 12s here, in these situations the results are pretty much identical. This includes the issues we found with the rendering of fine details. The overall detail level is nice, but complex things like foliage, grass, and window blinds appear smeared and over-sharpened when you look closely. Photos from the ultra-wide camera are excellent, with a super wide field of view and nice distortion correction. You get great contrast, accurate colors, and reasonably wide dynamic range. The detail level is decent too, but foliage is again a challenge. The 2.5x zoomed photos from the telephoto camera are superb. You get high contrast, spot-on colors, and well-balanced dynamic range. You get plenty of resolved detail too, and while the foliage can be hit or miss, the problem spots are not as apparent as on the main camera. Night mode triggers automatically in low-light scenes, and works even faster here than on the 12 Pro. You hold the camera still for just 1 second, and these shots from the main cam are admirable. They're detailed, with low noise, balanced exposure, and well-preserved saturated colors. The highlights are handled very well too, and shadows look realistic. They have balanced exposure, a decent amount of detail, and preserved highlights. They are overall soft-looking though, so far from great, but still quite usable. The telephoto camera sometimes works at night. Depending on the available light, you'll either get a shot from this camera or a digital zoom from the main one. The telephoto shots are excellent, with a lot of fine detail, well-handled noise, natural colors, and good contrast. Even though there's no night mode support, we don't really miss it. There's nice contrast, low noise, outstanding dynamic range, inaccurate colors, and white balance. There's enough detail, though the foliage looks overprocessed, but this isn't really a big deal here. 4K footage from the ultra-wide cam has super dynamic range, colors, and contrast, but the resolve detail is just mediocre. And videos taken with a telephoto cam are excellent, with low noise, true-to-life colors, and impressive contrast and dynamic range. You get rich detail, and foliage looks better than it does on the main cam. Low-light 4K videos from the main cam are great. They are detailed enough, and have pleasant colors and well-handled noise. It will still look normal on a non-HDR screen, since the Dolby Vision information is saved separately. And there's electronic stabilization available on all cameras in all resolutions. It's fantastic, as you'd expect from an iPhone.